And now it's time for the reason everyone's here. Captaincy talk. So yesterday at like 9:30, what time was it when they actually?
I don't even remember.
It was like 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock
on Valentine's
That was
Day.
wild.
What the hell,
like,
bro?
Why announce it on Valentine's Day night on a weeknight? Like there wasn't a game.
So you know what they weren't doing
weird
yesterday.
announcement time.
That's what made me think like, okay, there's another shoe about to drop. Like they're doing this because Scott Lawton's going to be playing in Toronto tomorrow. Not for us. Like that was my immediate guess. Was something like that was going to happen.
I think it's just that Torts likes to fuck with people.
Honestly, it was Valentine's Day night, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to wake up all the journalists." That's basically.
Yep.
Oh, you're out on a date, and no, you're not. Start writing, Chuck.
So dumb.
He was fucking with you. He saw you weren't on the trip, Charlie.
Yep.
And so he was like, "I know what I'm going to do."
Yep.
No, it was. So Coots is named the 20th captain in team history. They have obviously been without a captain since they traded Claude Giroux back in 2022. What do you make of, like, is it as simple as he likes to fuck with people? Like they basically vowed there ain't going to be a captain. They went through all last season. They get through 2/3 of this season and finally just go, all right, it's Coots. Like, what do you make of the just timing, first of all?
He has to be fucking with us because I feel like a lot of us knew it was either Coots or TK, and for him to announce it on Valentine's Day at like 8 o'clock at night, I mean, that's just so ironic.
I think if there's something that I had to point to as to why it happened now, I go back to what happened last week. Because one thing that John Tortorella made very clear, and I put this in my column for Diehards Only at allphly.com. Please subscribe if you want to read the full column. But I put this in my article that I released today. One thing John Tortorella made very clear at the start of the year, number one, was that he's not going to name a captain. But number two, that he didn't feel like the room was ready to take charge on its own. He felt like the coaching staff still needed to kind of hold the guys' hands, and if there was a bad game, they needed the coaching staff to come in and rip them and point out all the mistakes they made and make it clear that they needed to be better. But John Tortorella said on multiple occasions that I wanted to get to the point where I don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. That the guys just know. They know when they played poorly. They know when certain guys made a mistake, and the room can police itself. Well, one thing that I found really fascinating was that Winnipeg game last week. So they go out, they kick ass in the first period, final 40 minutes, they play like crap, they hang on. John Tortorella gives one of his vintage short press conferences where he doesn't give the media anything because he's clearly very angry with the way the team played. I expected he was going to go in to the room and rip everybody and make it clear that that was unacceptable. We might have gotten the win, but you just didn't play well, and this is not going to get the job done. Talked to John Tortorella the next day, and John Tortorella basically said, I didn't say a word to him because I trust this room. I think that they will respond the way they should. I don't feel like I need to tell them that. And I asked, hey, is it a risk that they maybe don't respond that way? And John Tortorella, I quoted him in this piece, basically said, you have to give them opportunities. You have to give them opportunities to show that they can do it on their own. We're not going to be holding their hands forever. So what do the Flyers go out and do? They go out and play a really good game against Seattle. They didn't carry over the poor 40 minutes. They basically turned that first period and played it for the entirety of the game. They outshoot the Kraken 38-19. Control that game pretty much from start to finish, regardless of the fact that the score was close. Flyers are the better team pretty much throughout that game. I kind of wonder if that was the final test. If that was John Tortorella giving the team one last test to see if they are ready to have a formal leadership group, because now he feels confident that he doesn't have to hold their hand anymore. And now that he doesn't have to hold their hand anymore, now he can give somebody the C, because now he believes he can trust the room to police itself at least a lot more than he could certainly last season and also the beginning of this season. I wonder if that Winnipeg game and the response to the Winnipeg game was a little bit of a turning point for John Tortorella in thinking, you know what, it's time. Let's do it now.
It's a really good point. Like, I just look at the demeanor of this team in 23, 24. It's so much different from even like 2 seasons ago when they were going on those multiple 10-game losing streaks, because when they would get down in those seasons, you knew like, all right, it's over, it's done. But now if they go down, you're like, okay, they will fight back. You know that they're gonna fight back. There was a couple instances throughout the year where they were just gassed, but overall they fought in every single game. And I think that's a really good point that I think not a lot of fans probably knew. A lot of fans are probably, you know, like us thinking like, yeah, Torch is just fucking with us. But no, this is the professionals. You got to be able to call yourself. You got to be able to know when you need to keep yourself in check. So I thought that was a really good point there.
And the Tortorella thing is always we've said about him. Well, he's got a short shelf life because you can only yell and scream at the guys so long before they're just like, shut the fuck up.
But he really doesn't.
No, and him being able to pick his spots increases his potential shelf life. Yeah. And I think that's important. And now the other part of this, I know, I'm very simple-minded, Charlie. I think
you're not.
A plus B equals C. You do not think you will not allow things.
I don't think that's actually
like
right.
One thing happens.
1 + 1 = 2.
No, like
I don't think you can add letters.
What I'm saying is, my thought is like, all right, they made Sean Couturier the captain. That means they're trading Scott Laughton.
Oh, yeah.
And like I know you're not going to draw those conclusions because you're going to look at the bigger picture, but I will say your explanation here and how maybe that Winnipeg game and all that, the response past that is the turning point. Those comments sound very similar to when you asked John Tortorella straight up about the potential impact of trading Scott Laughton. Like we said on the show, you weren't even speaking in hypotheticals. Like, if a leader were to be subtracted, like you named Scott Laughton in the question. Yeah. And it's like, we can't be worried about that. If that's going to happen, then the leadership group ain't strong enough anyway, basically. Yeah. Do you think the possibility of a leader like Scott Laughton being subtracted, like that could have an effect on the room? So we're going to give the leaders some autonomy to kind of hold this thing together themselves.
Look, I'm not going to say that Scott Laughton is definitely going to be traded. I don't think the Flyers know if Scott Laughton is definitely going to be traded because a lot of it's going to depend on what offers they get.
And he's been so good lately.
But I do think there might be something to that in that before yesterday, there was only one guy on the team with a letter. And if you didn't formalize a leadership group and then you up and trade Scott Laughton in 2-3 weeks, suddenly the team maybe doesn't really know how to respond now that you formalize it. And Scott Laughton still has an A. It's not like they stripped the A from Scott Laughton. They added a C to Couturier. They added an A to Travis Konechny. But now that you formalize a leadership group, you have somebody with a C, and it's not Scott Laughton. It does make it so I think losing Scott Laughton, if he gets traded, it's going to hit this room hard regardless. But at least now, if he is moved, everybody has one guy who they know to look to in Couturier. Maybe that would have happened anyway. Maybe Couturier was already that guy just in an informal way. But now that it's formalized, I do think that it's just less of a story that, oh, the Flyers only have one guy with a letter and now he's gone. Who's the leader now? Then you have to slap something on somebody just to have somebody to talk to the officials. Now it's that, oh, you traded Scott Laughton. Yeah, he's a team leader, but he's not the team leader. The team leader is Sean Couturier. Maybe it's part of it.
The one positive from this news, I don't know if you guys saw it, but I loved seeing the throwbacks from, I think it was like the Winter Classic. Seeing Coots living with Danny Briere as a rookie, that was some good throwback.
It's really
vibes.
wild the way, like, if you've been on this train for Sean Couturier's career, he lived with the general manager when he was a 19-year-old rookie, and now he's the captain of the team. Like, the whole thing is freaking insane. I'm really happy for the guy.
Yeah,
I am too.
I don't know him, Charlie. You've been around him a long time. I just, like, having seen his career beginning to end. My first season covering, I was writing bullshit blogs for Bleacher Report, but it was 2010-11. And then, that summer happens, and that's when they draft Sean Couturier. Like, I've been doing this his whole career, and it's just really cool. But the choice, I don't know if it's not coming out of left field. No. He was, like you said, one of the two real candidates, honestly. Do you think the choice is more like it's him, he's the unquestioned captain of this team, or it's more about the uncertainty of TK? Because just a few minutes ago, we were saying TK is the straw that stirs the drink for this team on the ice. He's the best player. we assume they're going to resign him because like all the insiders are basically like, oh no, they're negotiating so that on July 1st they announce the contract extent. Like that's what it sounds like. Now negotiations could always hit a snag.
Sure.
These things are not definite. He might go, yeah, if I hit the market in a year, I could make like 10. So the cap's going up again. I might get 10 and a half. Like, so maybe, yeah, you never know. There's a whole year before his contract expires though. Do you think it's more to do with the uncertainty of TK, or it's like, no, this is definitely Coots' room?
I would say I definitely think it's because of who Coots was as a player on and off the ice. I think TK, I think he's like a really good leader with his play on the ice, but I feel like when I watch Coots, his leadership on and off the ice is something that you can definitely notice. Charlie, I think you can speak better of it because you've been around the team, but that's just for me sitting here. What I see is that Coots more of a leader on and off the ice.
Yeah, I kind of equate it to the way Boston has seen their leadership group progress, where, I mean, obviously Chara was the captain for years. Then Bergeron's the captain. Now Bergeron's retired. Now Marchand's the captain. If you look at it being like Bergeron to Couturier, Marchand to Konechny, one story that I cite in my piece that came out today at allphly.com was when I covered the game in Arizona earlier this year. And Sean Couturier, we interviewed him after the game. Travis Konechny, I think, had like 2 goals. He had one of his big games of the year. And Sean Couturier said, the one thing that I really notice about TK now versus where he was 3-4 years ago is he's just so much more mature as a player and a person. And we got to interview Couturier before TK. So I asked TK, Sean Couturier just talked about your maturity. What is that? How does that make you feel when you hear a guy you've played with for that long who you respect say that about you? And Konechny laughed and he's like, yeah, I guess I'm more mature, but I still after I have a particularly crazy shift, I look down the bench and Couturier gives me that look, and I know that I've gone a little bit too far.
We always talk like, oh yeah, the Flyers power play looked better. It's like, well, the first period power play they had, I was like, that's one of the best ones of the year, and they don't score. They had a few chances. Like, yeah, when the bar is that low, like Konechny being more mature does not mean he's mature.
But my point point is that TK has matured. He's definitely developing into more of a leader. But if by his own admission he's still looking over at dad, looking for that approval, I don't think you can justify to the room that TK is the captain when even TK by his own admission is still deferring to dad.
And I think a lot of times like we look at different styles of captains, and it was like, well, Mike Richards is out there running like he's nuts. They called him Cannon. Like the type of player he is and the type of personality he has, you think maybe lends itself more. And like Giroux's a bad captain because they lost, but like he's more of the quiet type, and people think that's a different sort of lead, and maybe not the grab you by the face mask like Tom Brady kind of leader.
Yeah.
Like you look at the two styles of play, and I think outsiders might look at TK as more of like the on-ice leader. But in terms of overall, we're all speculating. No one really knows what goes on in the room. But the anecdote Charlie just tells us is like, yeah, even that guy, who's that guy for this team, looks at Coots and is like, yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I got to chill.
Yeah,
you're right.
Exactly.
You're right, Dad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe at some point down the road, and Couturier signed until 2029, 2030, so it's going to be quite a while.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as long as he continues to play and doesn't have injury problems. But maybe at some point down the road, that baton will be passed to Travis Konechny the same way that Bergeron passed it to Marchand eventually. But I think right now, it wouldn't have been the proper understanding of the dynamics of the room to give the C to Konechny just because Konechny scores more points than Couturier, and because Konechny's probably more talented than Couturier at this stage, and because Konechny's probably going to make more money than Couturier at this stage. I think it showed an understanding of the dynamics of the room for them to give it to Couturier over Konechny, even if Konechny would have been maybe the more fun choice.
You just brought up an interesting idea because I didn't think about the money. Now, this is an apples to oranges comparison because G was both the best player and the captain.
Right.
But G kind of signs that contract, and it's like, ain't no one making more than that guy. You always have that benchmark. Sean Couturier right now is the highest paid player on the team.
Konechny's going to get more than
Konechny, you don't think that's maybe some sort of negotiating ploy?
I mean, maybe, but it ain't going to work.
Yeah, just a thought, just something that popped in my mind when you mentioned it. Do we have any more on this? I thought there was something else I wanted to say, and I don't remember.
I think just from my perspective, and this will again be more of a plea, the same way I beg you not to turn on Sam Harrison just because he's now the number one. The thing with the captaincy is that while it is important and while the players, it means a lot to the players. I'm sure this is a really, really important last few days for Sean Couturier. It feels like the culmination of his career. I'm sure he's very proud of it. The other players are really happy for Sean Couturier. I watch and I remember what happened to Claude Giroux. And my view of the captaincy and why I get frustrated with it and why people rag on me about it, why I make jokes about it is, and this is really what it boils down to. The captaincy, in my mind, allows for such lazy analysis of the hockey team. Because, and I put this in my column, it is significantly harder for both a media member and a fan, for that matter, to actually take stock of a game and analyze the reasons for a loss or the reasons why a team is struggling or the reasons why a playoff series is lost. It's significantly harder to do that with tape and stats and reporting. It's much easier to just say, well, it's the captain's fault.
They wanted it more.
Because the captain, if he would have done more, if the captain would have willed this team, then the team would have won. And because they lost, that is proof that the captain did a bad job. I think it is lazy analysis, and I think it is incorrect analysis the vast majority of the time. That's what I would get frustrated about when it came to Claude Giroux, because I think that if you're blaming every loss on the captain, if you're blaming every season that doesn't end in a cup on the captain, I think it's lazy analysis, and that's what I hate about it. It's not that the captaincy isn't important. Couturier having the C, it's an honor for him. The players will undoubtedly look at him just a little bit differently now that he's got that C on his chest. But the idea that now every time the Flyers do something or don't do something that makes you angry as a fan, like, don't blame it all on Couturier just because he has the C now. It hasn't changed that much. He's still the same guy. It's just like too many people turn the captain into the target of their ire when they're angry and they're looking for someone to blame. And that's the part of the captaincy in hockey that will always rub me the wrong way, because I think it's utterly ridiculous and also extremely lazy.
It's so weird because, like, in most sports, the fans are always like, fire the coach, fire the GM. Maybe like even in football, like we have captains. In soccer, you have a captain.
It doesn't have the same mystique as it does in hockey.
I don't. Why is that though? Like, I don't.
It's just been like, because like football, they did it recently. Like it's just always, and it's been such a a Bobby Clark, a Mark Messier. Like those guys were so great. It's like, well, they did it because no, they did it because they're awesome. Like, I just named two of the fucking best players of all time, and that's always kind of been a contention of mine. I go back and forth on what kind of guy I want to wear the C. I understand putting it on your best player because I've always thought like, okay, now he gets to be the one talking to the refs and he gets to build a relationship with the refs, and maybe then they'll give him the superstar calls. Also, a decade of Claude Giroux as captain showed me that doesn't happen. So I've kind of always thought it's best to put it on a Jason Smith type. And I don't think Couturier is a Jason Smith.
No.
Like, he was at the end of his career. It was one, but like more of just the veteran leader. And it takes that sort of pressure off the best player. Like Travis Konechny doesn't have to worry about being the best leader. He can just go out and do stupid Travis Konechny shit and then score a goal.
Exactly.
Because he doesn't have to worry about the weight of the C. And I think like this is kind of like, it's good that when Michkov gets here, in all likelihood, it's not going, well, when's he getting the C? You know when he's getting the C? 5 or 6 years from now, maybe when Sean Couturier retires. Yeah. Like, I think that's a weight that you then don't have to put on them. And that's good. And that the thing I wanted to say that I forgot and I now remember, I always kind of hope, and we're running out of dudes, someone with a little bit of a connection to Mr. Snyder and past eras. And he played a little with Pronger. He played with G. Mr. Snyder was still alive for the beginning of his career and like still kind of around at points. We're running out of dudes who can kind of carry that legacy. And when we're talking about this new era of Orange, restoring the Flyers and everything, This is part of it.
There is something to be said about it being a bridge.
Yeah.
And I think there's also something to be said, which was a theory, and I don't think it was this simple, because I think Sean Couturier still had to prove himself to John Tortorella. The room had to improve the way it has this year for Tortorella to believe that someone deserved to wear a C in the first place. But there's something to be said about the fact that Tortorella did not give anyone the captaincy last year during the year when Sean Couturier couldn't play.
Yeah. And now, and he comes back. It's like, all right, you're good. Like, he got banged up tonight. Hopefully he's all right. When you look at it again, it's like, it could be, but it doesn't look super serious. He's missed a few games, but he basically looks like he's going to be able to build back to some semblance of his former self, and he's going to be around for the length of this contract.
Well,
and so it makes sense that the guy who's going to be here forever is, okay, you're the leader then. You ain't going nowhere.
I put it in my column, and obviously he has to stay healthy for this, but there's an off chance if he plays the rest of his contract, he could end up being the Flyers' all-time games played player in their history.
It's real. That is
He could pass Bob Clark.
It's I think Dr. Evil Gritty said that to us a couple weeks ago. It was if he plays every game through his contract, which difficult, he'll beat Bobby by like 100.
Yeah,
and that's a ton.
It's a lot.
That's absolutely insane.
We all silly like the mayor.